And the way that we found some success was we found in Phoenix, a lot of these properties have old grandfathered in zoning where they were like single family homes or small duplexes, but they were on large lots and they're zoned to be able to put more units on it.
Welcome to the House Hacking Success Podcast, where you'll learn the path to free rent and financial freedom through real estate. Featuring your hosts, Brad Labrie and Drew Klingler.
Welcome to House Hacking Success. I'm your host, Bradley Labrie, with my co-host, Drew. Drew, how you doing?
Doing good. How you doing, Brad?
Doing great, man. Today we had Ciro on the show, who is super unique to all the other guests we've had. He grew up in the industry with his family, and he continues to invest with his family. So he got to sit in a lot of high-level meetings when he was a young kid and just digest everything that it is in the real estate industry and grow his mind. It was super cool.
It was great. I think the coolest thing that stood out to me about Ciro was the fact that even though his dad was teaching him about real estate and he got to be a fly on the wall at those meetings, he still took it upon himself to learn about real estate on his own, reading books on his own, and he just recognized that opportunity at an early age. And I just thought that was a really cool thing.
Yeah, and he's doing so many things at a high level now that he continues to still house hack. I mean, that's the theme, Brandon Turner, David Green, all these big time real estate investors, they just continue to find a way to live for free and pour all their money back into real estate to grow their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, still house hacking, and he probably doesn't have to, but he chooses to because he knows that the long-term payoff is well worth it.
So today we're going to talk about a lot of things, house hacking, his personal deals, but then we're going to dive into development, zoning, how he goes before zoning boards to use developments on current property, and then just kind of big picture stuff. Things for real estate investors and house hackers, how you got to get clear on your goals. This was just such a thorough podcast. I know our listeners are going to love it.
It's a good one.
All right, well, let's jump into the show, Drew.
Hey, everyone. Real quick before we start the show, Brad wrote an amazing ebook that will teach you everything you need to know about house hacking and living rent-free. To get a free copy, text HouseHack, all one word, to 22828. That's HouseHack, all one word, to 22828 to get your free copy.
Welcome to the show, Ciro. We're thrilled you're here.
Thanks, guys. Very excited to be here.
So you kind of have a unique background, actually unique from all of our guests on the show. You come from a family that you were raised in real estate, right? You kind of, from my understanding, you started when you were 14 years old. Talk about that, growing up in the industry, understanding maybe things at 20 years old that most people don't realize until they're 40. Talk about the pluses and the minuses of kind of growing up in a business like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I think 14 is when I probably started actually working at pretty much since day one. I remember even when I was a kid before that, going to some of my dad's properties and kind of like seeing all the tenants and different people talking to him, and he was like going through and collecting rent and doing everything. And I remember it was like, Dad, what are you doing? He was like, we own this. Like, we own this building. And I was like, whoa. It was like, even as a kid, I was like, light bulb, this is what I want to do. So I started actually with my dad here. So I started with him when I was 14. He was flipping houses at the time. This was like probably 2002 to 2006. So I started then, and he took me to the flips he was working on, and he had his construction crews that he was running, and he gave me a gallon jug of water and they were like gardener's gloves. I don't think he had actual work gloves for me at the time. He gave me those, and he dropped me off. He said, I'll pick you up in 8 hours. And he paid me $2 an hour. And I started from there, just kind of like doing every job and learning the really difficult parts of the business. Like, I didn't get to see the fun investing part for like a few years. So I started with that, and over time, just kind of able to work my way up, learn everything. And then as I got older, probably, starting after 18 through college, I just really learned everything I could about real estate. I think it was a really big advantage being able to start at a young age, because the things that we're learning and I would read about in books, I would actually be able to go see it happen in real life. So like, props to my dad, he would literally take me to these meetings, like when he was negotiating or like going to close a deal or anything he was doing. Like, he would just take me, and I wouldn't speak or anything, but I would just sit there and I would just listen. Like, I'd try to absorb everything I could. So kind of the real world experience that I think was a huge advantage, and not a lot of people are able to get at that age, combined with like I probably read like every real estate book you could because I saw the opportunity. So
Yeah.
that those two things together helped me really, like when I started investing myself right after college, I was able to really hit the ground running and kind of have a good, strong foundation to build off of.
And you almost have like a real life rich dad Robert Kiyosaki story where, which is so cool to me because I was never in any kind of meetings like that. But, just sitting there being a fly on the wall, listening to these type of high level conversations has to be so cool as a young kid.
Yeah, and it was really motivating too. So I kind of saw like this is the potential that I could have, and this is what I could do if I work hard. And I also saw all the work that it took to get there. So it was just a tremendous opportunity, and I tried to take advantage of it as much as I could.
Awesome. I think it's really cool you recognized that opportunity and dived in, decided to learn more about it outside of what your dad was teaching you, reading books on your own and stuff like that. But could you tell us about your first duplex that you house hacked? How'd you find
Yeah.
it and how did you finance it?
Sure. So the first house hack was here in Phoenix. I found it actually. This was in 2015, so you actually could find properties on the MLS. I know today it's like impossible here,
Yeah.
but found that one on the MLS, and it was in not, I wouldn't say the best area. It wasn't like dangerous or anything, but not the area where ideally I would have been able to live in for the house hack. But it had potential, and I knew just from market knowledge that I'd be able to collect my rents and it'd be safe. I wouldn't have too big of issues. So that property, it was listed at the time. It was overpriced. It was like 140,000 at the time. Like being able to buy properties for less than 100K a door for duplexes is like unheard of today. But
Yeah.
you could do it then, and it was overpriced even then. So that one, we negotiated quite a bit. And what I ended up doing is at the inspection, it had basically needed a complete roof replacement, and the sewer line and the water lines all the way out to the street needed to be replaced. So banked off the experience there, and I knew to scope the sewers and scope the plumbing when you go to buy these properties. So I was able to find it, and I ended up getting a $20,000 deduction. So basically, I hit him with my Binzer and the repair ask with a $20,000 repair credit to do those things. And he ended up threatening to cancel, and it was like a whole back and forth. So we actually canceled the contract on him because I had seen through tax records, I think the guy paid like $40,000 for the property. So I knew he had room and he didn't have a mortgage. So I knew that he was just trying to get the best deal he could.
Mm-hmm.
But I also knew that he was going to continue to have this issue over and over. It's like people who are buying $130,000 properties, they typically don't have the cash to spend 30 grand on top to fix it up. So we canceled on it, and before it, like the paperwork even processed, the guy was back on the phone, and oh, I changed my mind, let's sell it. And we ended up, I ended up buying it for I think 110,000. So at the time, it was a big deal. I think I was 24. Used an FHA owner occupied loan, so it was 3.5% down. I think I spent a total of like 8,000 to get into the property. It might have even been less. So I took advantage of that, and I actually had the only crazy friend that he was only guy crazy enough to live in this property with me. He lived in the second bedroom, so there were two ones on the duplex. He lived in the second bedroom, so he paid me rent, and I had a tenant that was in the back. I lived in the front, and the tenant lived in the back unit. Tenant lived in the back, and they paid me rent. And after it was all said and done, I did have to fix up the property, so I had a good investment there. But after it was all said and done, I think I actually profited like $75 a month after everything: utilities, landscaping, pest control. I actually put money in my pocket every month at that deal.
That's amazing, and it's kind of the entrepreneurial bug. I mean, we hear this often where people will just fill their bedroom just out of instinct. Like maybe they don't. You did come from a real estate background, but a lot of people don't. They just find a way to live for free or make money on the deal, and that's super cool.
Yeah, I mean, and be able to cut my housing expense right out of college was, I mean, I can't even tell you enough how big that was for me to be able to save, because I basically just took that money every month and put it in the bank. And that was what allowed me to really grow faster and invest in more deals.
That's amazing. So talk about your second house hack, which I think might be the one that you're in right now. Talk about that. How did you find that one? How did you fund it?
Sure. Yeah. This is the house I'm in right now. So it's actually an interesting property. So it's called a Gemini property. Basically, there are two single-family detached houses on the same lot. So they're not like your traditional duplex. So there's a house in the front, and then there's a house in the back that was probably built as like a guest house at some point over the years. So we bought that. I bought that in 2018. Another property, this time good area, but the property needed work. So the front house actually looked really good, and that was a big draw, as I only had to fix up really one of the two units. The back house was just an absolute mess. It was unappealing. It had like these weird like arches in the front that it just blocked off all the light, and it had the Saltillo tile, and it just wasn't great. And the price the seller was asking for, he was asking for a price that it was if the units were all fixed up and it was turnkey, ready to go. So there was a big struggle with that. I ended up negotiating with him. The course of this deal worked out probably over 6 to 8 months, because there was a stubborn, I think the guy thought he was like the next Donald Trump. I don't know what, this guy was a real character. So we went back and forth. The property fell out of contract twice with two other prospective buyers, because it went on the market and it just immediately got into multiple offer scenario, and it was getting bid up. But it continued to fall out for the same reason. The back house needed too much work. But that's perfect for me. With the construction background, we had the ability to fix it up ourselves for cheap. Where the people who were looking, this was more of like people who were looking to buy it, live in the front, put the back unit on Airbnb, like get a little extra cash flow. This was way too big of a challenge for them. So I knew I had that advantage. And eventually what we did was, after the home fell out of contract the second time, we basically just called a guy every few months, and like we would send a contract every few months. So eventually he said, okay, I've had enough of this. Let me actually entertain this offer. And what I did to kind of give him the security of not backing out is actually offered, the contract was as is. So I told him we won't even get another inspection. He actually sent us previous inspection reports from that agent had. So I said, we won't even get another inspection. You're going to have to give us a bit of a discount. I think we ended up paying like 20-ish thousand less than what he wanted. But I had the certainty, and I gave him the certainty that we were going to close. So that's what made us stand out, and allowed us to do the deal.
And that's
in that one.
That's an important point, of contracts that maybe a lot of people probably don't realize. And a lot of reason why people are frustrated with maybe, presenting FHA offers, because there's so much to an FHA loan, and where someone like you comes in a little bit less, but you give them certainty that you're going to close.
Yeah. And it was, definitely a risk that I took, but property enough times and banking off the experience and expertise I had, that we were able to make that deal work by doing that. And that made the difference and actually closed it.
Awesome.
Cool. Could you tell us about the process of refinancing an FHA loan into a conventional investor loan?
Yeah. It's challenging, and it requires a tremendous amount of patience. So I also recommend, I know you guys have discussed on previous episodes, having a good relationship with a broker and kind of going until you find the right person. I happen to have a tremendous broker who does invest himself, so he gets it. So the process, essentially, because I was able to improve the property, I had forced equity. So by improving the property, I was able to appreciate the value. So luckily, I was able to refinance it into a conventional loan, just a typical rental property loan with 20% equity. So the LTV, I think it ended up, after the appraisal, I was about 70% loan to value. So because I had the spread, it was easier to make it work. And they just, the process, it probably took about 2 months. But since they had done the loan, the same broker he did the original loan on this property for me. So it was easier because they were familiar. It took about 2 months, and I refinanced it actually recent. It was pretty recent. I think it was October. And I was able to cut luckily, interest rates dropped in that year as well,
Yeah.
quite a bit. So I was able to cut my payment, I think around $400. And because I had the equity now, I was able to drop off the PMI. And that was about $170 right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we get that question a lot, like how, can you do it? How can you do it? And it's, it's a challenging process from the standpoint of, the paperwork and the verifications and sometimes, but it's also an easy process. If you either force appreciate like you did, or you pay down the loan, it's not the end of the, it's pretty easy to do if you get the right broker on your side, from that standpoint. Now, you took that first house hack and you actually took the profits and bought a 12 unit, from my understanding, correct?
Yes.
Tell us about that process, and how you're able to do that.
Yeah, I sold that property. So I bought it in 2015, sold it in 2018. And the property, I don't like to sell. I'd always hold if I can. But in this case, I thought the property just appreciated way too much for the area. The area wasn't really getting better, but the property more than doubled in value in just a short time. Said, you know what? I don't think if there's a recession or if the market goes down, I don't think I'll get this price for quite a long time after that. So I did decide to sell. And something really cool about that I thought was I actually sold it to another person doing a house hack.
Nice.
So it like kind of came full circle. And I know the tenant, I ran into the tenant that I had in the other day, and the person, they did move in and they're house hacking it. And I think they're doing pretty well too.
Awesome.
So kind of nice to see that.
Yeah.
But I did take that money and we purchased a 12 unit multifamily property here in Phoenix. This one was, we actually had built a relationship from an investor my dad had worked with prior. So he had bought a property that this investor was selling. He was like a very wealthy San Francisco investor who he was a total absentee owner. The place was a dump. He just wasn't putting money into it. So he sold a property to my dad, and then he was looking to sell this one. So because of that past experience, he was like, we were one of the first people who got the call. So it was an off-market deal. And this property, it was, I mean, some of these units, like they didn't even have doors on the cabinets. Like they were just like, it's just open boxes. They're in that bad, like, extension cords running on the ceiling for lights and the whole deal. However, it's in a really up and coming area in Phoenix. So we knew that the value was there in order to fix it up and get it to par. Also, it's a garden style property. So it's all single level units. They're like about 900 square feet. So they actually feel like little houses. They have like little yards and they have in-unit washer dryer. So that I thought was unique. And we were able to offer a different product than everything else, which is like your traditional, 5-6 story mid-rise here in Phoenix. So we fixed those up, and the first one we're increasing the rents like $300 to $400 a month for these units because they were that underutilized. Which is like kind of the strategy that we're going with in order to compete in this market, is you can actually build 12 more units on the property. Wow. Because there's so much land and the zoning is right. Yeah, we can without touching the existing 12, we can add 12 more, and that's going to give us a total of 24 units for this property. And that's going to be where the real upside is, because the property we bought now is, pretty close to market value. But when we build the 12, we're going to have a lot of equity and a lot of spread there to be able to do that.
And you're breaking ground on that pretty quickly here, right? Am I understanding?
That will be next year. We have another development that we're about to break ground on, which is kind of the same situation. That one's going to be before. So we're still
tell
small.
us about these, the developments you're within, and then kind of the rest of your portfolio.
Sure. So the philosophy that we had, essentially, we're trying to stand out and be able to not have to compete where all the big boys investors from out of state, they have deals that we could never compete on capital wise. So we try to go where they're not. And the way that we found some success was we found in Phoenix, a lot of these properties have old grandfathered in zoning where they were like single family homes or small duplexes, but they were on large lots and they're zoned to be able to put more units on it. So we try to find properties where we can build more units or add to the property itself in order to do like a small development and get a lot of upside there. So the first one we did was it was a triplex actually, and somehow we found a way to put 3 more units on the property and get a total of 6. Um, so that was really successful, and it was something that no one else was looking at it in that way. I think we were probably the only people crazy enough to try it.
Yeah.
And it was we definitely struggled to make it happen. I mean, it was probably the hardest deal we've ever done by far, and it was one of the smaller ones.
Was it objections from zoning, or was it objection from the neighborhood? Like, what were some of the things that you hit with that deal?
A lot of it was the city. So they just couldn't wrap their head around putting new construction combined with existing units. It was just like, it was too much for them.
Yeah.
So big challenges there. We went back and forth so many different times, and we were, fighting with inspectors and the whole thing. But we kind of looked at it like, the more we're struggling here to do this deal, the better upside it probably has.
Yeah.
So we were willing to trade our time and basically having a headache every day to deal with this in order to make something happen that a lot of people just wouldn't even give the time of day who were bigger and more successful.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, they're, all the bigger ones are going after these large, 100-unit complexes or whatever with the big upside, where you as a local investor that really knows your area, knows the zoning, and is looking for deals like that. I mean, there's big time opportunity zones like that for you. Sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to be doing, we did that first one, and now we have another one upcoming, and then that 12 unit. So we're going to have done a total of 3 in a few years here. But yeah, it's really kind of all about how are we able to compete and do deals in a market that is really oversaturated, and everyone wants to buy these small properties. It's like, how can we find a way to make deals work that most people aren't even able to do and able to look at?
Yeah.
Very cool. So you focus mostly on value add deals.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you look for when you're looking at a value add deal?
Yeah. So a part of it is what I was just describing, where we look for properties that have kind of untapped potential. So whether we can build more on them, or we can add parking, we can add storage units, really anything that we can look at in a unique way to find more value. So that's one part of it. I would also say we kind of call it like the fringe areas, where we're looking where a lot of the investments are already happening, and like the areas are getting hot, and you see cap rates compressing and rents rising quickly. So we'll try to identify like kind of what's next, and we'll look for properties right there on the fringes. And hopefully, we've been fortunate to be in a pretty much an appreciating market for like 10 years. Hopefully the area catches up, and then we're positioned to where we were able to get a deal at a lower price for what people, now that the area is hot, like they're coming in and they're paying significantly more than what we had paid a few years before.
Yeah. And that's a huge value add just right there component, where you're looking, futuristically, and then when all these other outside investors or people at least who didn't recognize it come in, that's a big value add play. So let's transition a little bit to working with family. You're a family run business. Talk to people, because a lot of people do have family members that, that's kind of the first ones I think about when partnership is brought up, my dad or my brother or whatever, but talk to, what to set, there got to be boundaries, I'm sure. There's got to be black and white, because you don't want to take, the business side of things to the dinner table at Thanksgiving. You don't want to have those kind of, and it sounds like you guys do a great job of that. Talk to that, if you would.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that has allowed us to, still have a strong family bond and still be close with each other despite working together frequently. We're really good, and I think it's because I saw the success. Like, my dad worked with my grandfather before that, so we kind of followed what they had learned. It really is, you have to learn how to completely detach your work life and whatever you're working on in business from your family life. So we almost have it's almost like 2 entirely different families we're working with, right? So we have I work with my dad in real estate, and then I go home and, I go for Sunday dinner and I hang out with them there, and nothing that we do on the business side spills over into the family time. So it's almost
how
like,
is that? Like, you guys have done that because it's happened multiple times. Like, how should somebody go about doing that to try and set up the same thing that you have?
yeah, I mean, it would probably start with having a conversation. If you're going to go into business together and you're not previously doing it, I would have a conversation and set clear boundaries of how we're going to communicate, and kind of rules for how we can talk about business, and when we put it aside and completely forget it, no matter what's happening, and we have our family time. So like for us, it was, if we go to the house, if I go over to my parents' house for Sunday dinner or whatever we're doing, we have a rule where we just don't talk business at the table. And if you're not talking about it and you make that conscious decision to just, no matter what, you just don't do it, then you can focus on, having, enjoying time with your family, and
Yeah.
you help keep it separate. But it's absolutely a challenge, and it takes constant work. Because like I said before, if things are going bad, it's pretty tempting to start bringing that up. And then before you know it, you're fighting, and then your whole day is ruined. So yeah, it's constant work.
Yeah, what would you say you've learned the most in your investing journey?
I've learned a lot. Probably some of the biggest things I've learned. One is you have to have a tremendous amount of patience. So me coming in, seeing it from 14 or younger, out of college, I was young, coming in thinking I was going to take over real estate. And in 1 year I was going to have 100 doors, and that's kind of how people think, like, oh, it's going to be easy. I'm gonna go right to the top. But it takes a lot longer than you think. So being patient in order to see through your vision and your strategy. But then the other thing I learned is you need to be really confident in what you're doing, and you need to be sure in your vision for where you want to be and how you're going to get there, and the plan for how you're going to make that happen. Because I think what I was doing is kind of unconventional. Like house hackers, that's not a normal thing to do, right? You're kind of crazy if you're doing house hacking. You're doing a lot of this stuff. So I mean, I would have friends who come over and they're like, "Ugh, you live here? Like, why are you doing this?"
Right.
And you got to be confident in what you're doing to kind of ignore that and block it out, and really stick on your path. Because people don't really, a lot of times they don't see the journey. They just see the end result, and they're like, "Oh wow, how'd you get there?" It's like, well, I was dealing with a lot of difficult things, and I was struggling for years while I was on my vision to get to where I wanted to end up.
Yeah, that's such a key point, because you talk to people wanting 100 doors, and to the fact that you really got to get clear with your vision. Because I see a lot of people, they think they want to get to 100 doors so badly that they'll go into the lowest price points to get whatever property they can, just to buy property and get to 100 units. Where somebody like you got really clear on your goal. You knew why you were house hacking, right? You wanted to grow this vision, but you wanted to do it in the hot markets in your area. You want to go into the up and coming areas. You had a defined plan. You weren't trying to chase with some of the bigger, out of state get or corporations that were coming in. You knew what you wanted, and you weren't necessarily focused on, getting as many units as possible. You were trying to get the right units in the best areas that you possibly could. And that takes a lot of discipline to focus solely on your vision rather than what everyone else's vision is.
Absolutely. And I think part of it was because when I started, I was really young. So I think a lot of people look towards like the model now, which, the big buzzword is syndication, right? Everyone wants to syndicate multifamily. For me, I think I was kind of realistic enough to know that at 22, I wasn't going to be syndicating, $10 million apartment deals. And anyone who was going to give me that kind of money, like, I don't know if that would have been a smart thing to do at the time, right? So I knew like I needed to focus on building a base and proving a track record first, and kind of learn and really get my hands dirty. So that was my vision. And now in the future, if I do want to do those things, I'll have, a nice foundation to build off of, and a track record to kind of like use to leverage that success.
Yeah. And so you talked about buzzwords. Syndication is one of them. There's a few of them. House hacking has sort of become a buzzword as well, right? And so in your mind, like, what separates potential house hackers from those that actually do it?
Sure. I think a lot of it is just fear. especially when you're going to do your first deal. But the flip side of it, that's why I actually think a house hack is an amazing first deal, because it's not just a real estate investment. Worst case scenario, you have a house that you can live in. And if you can just afford that house without the house hack and having people rent it out, you're still, everyone needs a place to live. So I think it does kind of reduce some of that fear. But it's also just, I think a lot of people are looking for the perfect deal, and it just doesn't, a lot of times it just doesn't exist. So like everyone waits until they find a perfect thing, and they find a property that's 90% there, but it has one little issue. A lot of times that's where you just have to kind of pull the trigger and make a deal work, where you're not always going to find that that A+ deal that's going to be the best thing ever.
Yeah, and Craig Kurlap came on the show, and he was talking about in his Denver market. Now that he wrote the book and everything, a lot of people are reaching out on house hacking. The frustrating thing with him is that they're all looking for this home run deal, or
Right.
they're looking to, win the battle of like getting a lower price than the purchase price, whatever. And we were just talking to, the fact that a lot of these listing prices are just so arbitrary. Like, if the numbers work, like if you understand the market, if you understand that the biggest ROI of house hacking is living for free and being able
Right.
to save, 30 or 40% or whatever it is that your mortgage or rent payments are, compared to your budget, like those are the frustrating things for him and I, where we look at, man, there's so many different ways to, get creative if your idea is to put as little down as possible. But, the price or looking for a home run deal, you're not going to become a millionaire on your first deal. And I think a lot of people
No.
don't really realize that.
Oh, completely agree. I mean, if you wait for all the stars to be aligned, you're just going to be waiting forever. It's just not going to happen. But also, I think that's where, I am always trying to look for ways that I can compete and have my own edge and stand out from, the rest of like your standard deals. I think house hacking is one of those ways to do that. Because like you said, if I'm able to get in a deal where maybe for a regular investment who's just going to buy it as a rental, maybe the numbers aren't that great. But if I'm going to live in there and still make some cash flow on it, but then I can cut 40% of my living expenses away, I mean, what can you do with that money?
Yeah.
That's where I think the real potential lies, and where house hackers have a bit of an edge over everybody else.
Absolutely. And that's to your point. Like, that's the thing that I bring up most to people is the fact that, like, normal investors, they have to put, just abnormally more amount of money down. They have to put 20 or 25% down. They have to have reserves, bank required reserves. A lot of people don't really understand all that part of it. But then they also have to cash flow from day one. You don't as a house hacker necessarily. I mean, it's not a bad thing, but like your biggest ROI, like we talked about, is the fact that you can cut your living expenses completely out. That's your real big return. And then when you move out, the property is going to cash flow, even more. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right.
And if you're spending like 6 to 8 months trying to find that home run deal, and maybe you do find that home run deal, but you just spent 8 months looking for a deal that you could have been saving $500 to $1,000, whatever your mortgage or rent is, and there's a big opportunity cost there. Like you said, get into a deal, save on that rent.
If you're looking for the deal that's going to make you $1 million, it's probably not out there right now. So find something, hit a double instead of a home run. At least you're out there doing it. And in my situation, I didn't expect a property to double, but it did. And then I was able to leverage that deal into something much larger, and then I was able to hit a home run there. So really, just by getting started, I think you never know where that journey is going to take you. But if you don't do anything at all, I mean, nothing will happen.
Real quick, with your long-term goals, like, you got this family business. What are your long-term goals in real estate?
Sure. So we've enjoyed developing a lot. So I would like to get to a point where we can develop a larger apartment complex. I would love to build, 100 to 200 units, something that we can really own and kind of live off of, and build some generational wealth and be able to hand it down. So I would like to continue to get into developing, and also would continue getting into multifamily deals. So right now we're doing, kind of 12 really properties up to like 20, 30, 40 units. But the next stage, that's where we want to start doing. I would like to get like some more partners together and start really taking down larger properties. And I also would like to expand outside of the areas that we've lived in and know. So, we know New York because we're from there, and we know Phoenix because I live here now. But I think the challenge is learning how to scale that and to grow it on a larger level. And part of that is being able to diversify in other markets. So that's kind of on the horizon for what I'd like to do in the next 5 to 10 years.
Awesome.
Very cool. So we love to read books on the show. Brad and myself read a lot. You started reading about real estate at a very early age. Could you tell us what your favorite business or mindset book is?
Sure. So outside of, I was looking at my library over here next to me, and I tried to find some different stuff. So outside of like the Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is the great stuff that everyone should start with, business books that I enjoyed, I have one here. It's called 0 to 1. Yeah, it's by Peter Thiel. I thought that was really good about building a business and building a startup, and it goes into a lot, kind of the work it takes to get there, and kind of finding your own niche and standing out in a market that's full of competition. So love that book from a business perspective, mindset perspective, and then real estate wise, I have two that I would probably recommend. One I think is kind of unique one. It's called Maverick Real Estate Investing. This one talks about all really successful real estate investors. Sam Zell, Donald Trump, goes into a lot of their stories. What I found really interesting with it is a lot of the stories are very similar. Like you'll find a lot of common themes that every investor did to get successful. So, I think you'll find a lot of it is it's not about like, there's luck involved, but the path is there for like how they became successful. So I loved hearing about those stories. Also, another book that I have, this one really, it's a metrics book, so kind of boring, but it's important to be able to kind of talk the talk when it comes to metrics and ratios. It's called What Every Real Estate Investor Needs to Know About Cash Flow and 36 Other Key Financial Measures. So super exciting title, but really important. So it goes into cap rate, IRR, cash on cash return. So if you want to get started and you want to understand what people are saying, if you listen to podcasts and you hear all these numbers flying around and ratios, good place to start to at least like get into it and learn.
It's awesome. 0 to 1 is a book that I've never read it, but I keep hearing about people tell me, I need to, I'm going to read it now that you mention it again, but I've heard it's an incredible book.
Yeah. It's an inspiring book too. He's a tech billionaire. He's one of the founders of PayPal, so knows his stuff.
Yeah.
But it's very different than your standard business book, where it talks about how to be unique and how to stand out and like how to really leverage that to come up with a new idea and succeed quickly. So I really enjoyed that one.
That's awesome. It's awesome. So Ciro, we appreciate you coming on. Your story is awesome. The fact that you grew up in a real estate family, you stuck with it, right? You got inspired from being around those conversations early in life. I know a lot of people can relate, and for me, I'm a little bit envious of you. The fact that you were in those kind of meetings and you grew your vision, and now you're developing and things like that. Where can people find out more about you and maybe reach out to you? Maybe they're in Phoenix, maybe they're in New York, where we actually have a lot of listeners from both those markets. Like, where can people reach out to you and talk to you, or maybe get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So I started trying to do a little bit of blogging and getting into that game. It's called millennialhousehacking.com. So you can reach out to me there. There's a contact button, go straight to an email there. You can also email me at Ciro@millennialhousehacking.com. Feel free to email. I do get a few emails, and I've actually met up with a few people through the website, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. I'm also on LinkedIn. I get a lot of networking through real estate investors there. I wrote a little ebook. I saw you guys have an ebook too. I wrote a little ebook. It's called Millennial House Hacking. It's on Amazon. I think it's like $2. It's a cool read. It's like 70 pages, but it's a good one to get started. So you can check that out too. But yeah, feel free. Anyone can reach out, especially if you're in Phoenix, like to connect, especially for young millennials. I definitely can relate to them and talk about getting started at a young age.
Yeah, we'll put all that in the show notes. But
cool.
That's awesome. And I'll have to check out your book as well, because, it's important to get, feedback from people that are actually doing it like you. People that are continuing to do it. A lot of people get to a certain level and they stop or whatever, but people like you, even we had Craig on the show, and he's like, man, literally all the top investors I know, they're still house hacking. Brandon Turner, David Green. They might be doing a little bit more luxurious, but the concept is still there. The fact that they can live for a lot less, or maybe free, and just pour the rest of their money into building a sustainable real estate company.
Yeah, I don't plan on stopping. I'm just going to figure out how to do it at a next level and get into better areas and better properties. But yeah, I'm going to keep this going as long as I possibly can because it allows me to live a great life because I'm eliminating 50% of my expenses. So yeah, definitely going to keep it going, and couldn't recommend more to anyone looking to house hack to get started.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And it's a testament because, like you said, people drop by, even for Drew and I and a lot of people we know, and they just don't get it. They're like, why would you ever do that? And people at my work, I mean, I don't even tell people that I do it anymore because, their reactions are just, that's ridiculous. Why would you not go buy the biggest house you possibly could?
Yeah.
And so it is a total different mindset, and it's a testament, house hack is a testament to people getting serious about their vision, not other people's vision. So we genuinely appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thank you guys. Yeah. Hey, appreciate the work you're doing, talking about house hacking and spreading the word. Great to see other people getting involved.
Yeah. And we appreciate it. We'll cross-reference you. We'll promote the site and everything. And so,
Cool.
Hey, we appreciate it. I know our audience got a lot from this show, so we appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Have a great one.
Thanks, Ciro.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. If you could do me a huge favor and go give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, I would really appreciate it. It would really help us out. If we provided any value, please go do that. Otherwise, there's a lot of people who haven't subscribed, so go ahead and go subscribe and you'll get notifications when a new podcast episode is released. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.